Hello everybody, Briars here with the first of many videos I'll be recording for the 451 training program. The first broad topic we'll be looking at is how to improve your read accuracy. And the first step in this larger journey, and the main topic of this video, is to find a good way to measure your accuracy that provides a metric for improvement along with providing some interesting statistics. What's important is you need to have a good reference point for what your reads are. When I'm working with somebody, they submit their reads to me at a regular interval, something like every 24 or 48 hours. If you're working alone, I recommend you sort of submit to yourself them at a constant pace too. Once the set of reads is in, it's important that you don't edit them, you don't touch them, and that's it. This is to make sure you have a reliable source of truth for your thinking at some snapshot of time. The second thing I would recommend is to make probabilistic reads, which are reads of the form, somebody is 25% mafia, somebody is 70% town, stuff like that. Instead of binary reads, which are this person is mafia, this person is town. I know probabilistic reads are harder, especially coming up with a number, but I would recommend getting into the habit, and in future videos we'll explore how to more accurately get that number by, say, how accurate is a tell, how much does it affect the random probability, stuff like that. Okay. So let's get started. We'll be using a tool called the Briars skill score. This Briars skill score measures our accuracy relative to a no-skill guesser, which is somebody that guesses based on just the number of players per game in a game per alignment. To do this, we take something called a Briars score for us and the Briars score for that no-skill guesser. So where we have to start really is this Briars score constant. So that equation you see at the bottom of the screen, that's your Briars score, and I'll walk you through it now. So if an outcome happens, it's a 1. If it doesn't happen, it's a 0. All this Briars score is the sum of the mean square differences between our prediction and the actual result. So suppose one of our predictions is that somebody is 0.75%, or someone is 75% town. Then F sub t over here would be 0.75. And O sub t, let's say they're actually 10, would be 1. So we have a bunch of these for each read we make, and we sum them up, and then divide it by how many reads we made. That's all this is. Some interesting properties we have is that the lower the Briars score is, the better a prediction is. You can see this makes sense because let's say you say somebody is 100% town, and they are town, you get a 1 minus 1 term. Let's say you say somebody is a 0% town, and they turn out to be mafia, you get a 0 minus 0 term. So 0 is the best score, 1 is the worst score. Also something to note is that complementary guesses are equivalent. So let's say you think someone is 75% town, saying that and saying somebody is 25% mafia is the same because you take the difference and you square it and you get the same number. So that works out very nicely. So the first example we'll look at is the no-skill forecast we talked about. This will be our reference score, but it's a Briars score in its own right. So suppose we're in a 9-player game with 7 town and 2 mafia. What's the Briars score? So you're in this game, so there are 8 players and 2 of them are mafia. So the default guess is that somebody is 75% town. So you can see down here that there's 6 town players, and each of them is 75% town, and the 1 here is because they are town. However, there are 2 mafia players, which again we guessed they're 75% town. But there's 0 because they're not 10. So it's over 8 because you're making 8 reads, and we get a Briars score of 0.1875. So this is our no-skill Briars score that will act as our reference score. Now the Briars skill score is just what it says on the screen here. It's 1 minus our Briars score over this reference score. So some properties of this is if we do exactly the same as the reference, our skill score will be 0. If we do better, it's some positive number that's less or equal to 1. And if we do worse, it's some negative number. It blows up to negative infinity because the reference score can be arbitrarily small. But in our specific case, for example, the smallest you can get is 1 minus 1 over 0.1875. So here's an example of computing a Briars skill score. Say this is the reads list you submitted. You see it over here. First, we compute our Briars score. So you can see this computation over here. If there's anything interesting, say we'll just look at the last one. We think A is a 60% town, but they're actually mafia, so you can see it's a 0.6 minus 0. Okay, So we get this as our Briars score. And then we compute our Briars skill score. We see it's positive. This means we're doing better than the reference score. This is a good thing. We're doing better than the proverbial dice rolling monkey. And yeah, you can do this for one day, for several days. We'll take a look at an example of that later, just to get a constant sense of how you're doing compared to the no-skill guesser. This also works for binary reads, even though I recommend you avoid these as much as possible, which are reads of 100% certainty. So you can see an example reads list here, and you see lots of ones and zeros because you're saying somebody is always town or never town. So in this case, where you're wrong about one mafia and one town, you end up with a Briars score of 0.25, which is actually worse than the no-skill guesser reference score. So you see you end up with, you end up with a negative Briars skill score. Here's our last more complicated example, which is a Briars skill score for multiple days. For simplicity, we'll look at lower numbers. There are 5 players left, 4 town and 1 mafia. We have a reads list. We eliminate town. Someone that's not you, that's town, is killed in night, and you're in 3-player lilac. And you submit another reads list. The reads list are over here, and we'll assume D is our mafia. So first, our Briars score. Just like before, we just sum up each of these 6 reads. Nothing special here. But what you notice is for our reference Briars score, there's a bunch of 0.75s for the first day and 0.5s for the second day. That's because as the day changed, the no-skill guesser changes the probability for how much someone is town or mafia. In this specific example, we're doing worse than the no-skill guesser, as you can see by the negative number here. And this matches our intuitive sense, since we called somebody that was mafia 60% town twice. So what can you do with this Briars skill score? You can take your Briars skill score for each game to give you a sense of how accurate you are in every game and track it over time. Be like, okay, my Briars skill score is getting better and better and better, or worse and better, going up and down. So you can see your progress or lack thereof. You can do more interesting things, like you can take your Briars skill score for a bunch of day 1s over several games, and a bunch of day 2s and a bunch of day 3s. This way you can see if your accuracy is generally going up or going down as you get deeper and deeper into a game. You can take your Briars skill score for only reads on a particular player, and then only reads on another particular player. And you can see, do you actually read somebody better, and by how much? You're spectating a game. You can compare your score with your friend. You can see who did a better job spectating. So there's lots of things you can do with this. I would say at a bare minimum is to compute this score per day and per game. So you can see your accuracy, you can see your improvement, and you can see very importantly, how you're doing compared to this no-skill guesser. If you're doing worse than a no-skill guesser, you probably need to change something a lot for how you're interpreting tells, how you're interpreting how important tells are. That's all for today. Next time, we'll probably look at, I'm actually not sure what the next video will be, but probably looking at some basics for how confident you are in a particular tell, and what probability a tell has of working. So see you next time. Bye-bye.